Before we go any further, I want you to stop for a second and think about something sitting in your kitchen right now. Not the expensive vitamins you bought after watching late night health commercials. Not the prescription bottles lined up in your bathroom cabinet. I am talking about something far simpler, something most people use every day without giving it a second thought. Your bottle of olive oil. Now ask yourself this question honestly. What if that bottle is doing far more than helping your food taste better? What if 2 tablespoons a day could influence your blood sugar, your joints, your skin, your heart, and even your brain in ways most people never imagine? Because according to some of the strongest nutritional research ever published, that is exactly what may be happening inside your body. I am Dr. William Lee, and for more than 30 years, I have studied how food interacts with the human body at the cellular level. And what I am about to share with you is not based on trends, internet myths, or wellness marketing. This comes directly from peer-reviewed scientific research. Inside high-quality extra virgin olive oil are more than 30 biologically active compounds, not one or two, more than 30. Each of these compounds interacts with different systems in the body, targeting inflammation, blood vessels, immune signaling, and even brain function through specific pathways that scientists can now measure in remarkable detail. For decades, many people viewed olive oil as nothing more than a healthier replacement for butter or vegetable oil. But modern research tells a completely different story. In fact, one of the most important studies ever conducted on nutrition forced scientists to rethink the role of olive oil entirely. The study was called Prediabetes, published in the New England Journal of Medicine. It followed 7,447 adults between the ages of 55 and 80 over nearly 5 years in Spain. Participants were divided into 3 groups. One group consumed extra virgin olive oil daily. Another group consumed mixed nuts. The third group simply received general dietary advice. But something unusual happened during the trial. The results became so overwhelmingly positive for the olive oil group that the independent safety board stopped the study early. Think about that for a moment. Researchers considered it unethical to continue denying the control group the same nutritional advantage because the cardiovascular benefits had become too obvious to ignore. The people consuming extra virgin olive oil experienced about a 30% reduction in major cardiovascular events, including heart attacks, strokes, and cardiovascular death. And this was not from an expensive drug or complicated procedure. It came from a simple food people had been pouring onto salads for generations. But the deeper findings were even more fascinating. Scientists analyzed blood samples from more than 100 participants and discovered major reductions in inflammatory markers. C-reactive protein, one of the primary indicators of chronic inflammation, dropped by roughly 35%. Interleukin-6, an inflammatory compound associated with joint damage, aging skin, and chronic disease, also decreased significantly. Researchers even measured reductions in oxidized LDL cholesterol, the dangerous form that sticks to artery walls and contributes to plaque buildup. When I first reviewed those results, I went back and read them again because nutritional interventions rarely produce numbers that dramatic. A 35% reduction in inflammation from a dietary change is extraordinary by medical standards, and it forced many researchers, including myself, to rethink what olive oil is actually doing inside the human body. Now, here's why this becomes even more important after the age of 60. As we age, the body gradually enters a state scientists call inflammaging. This is a low-grade, chronic inflammatory condition that quietly affects nearly every organ system. Unlike a fever or visible injury, inflammaging works silently in the background. Most people never realize it is happening unless specific blood tests reveal it. Inside your joints, inflammation slowly damages cartilage and increases stiffness. In your skin, inflammatory enzymes break down collagen faster than your body can replace it. In your bloodstream, inflammation interferes with insulin function, making blood sugar harder to control. In your arteries, it damages the lining of blood vessels and encourages plaque formation. And in the brain, chronic inflammation disrupts the protective systems that help preserve memory and cognitive function. What makes inflammaging so dangerous is that it rarely appears as one isolated issue. Instead, it spreads quietly through multiple systems at the same time. One process, many symptoms. That is why so many people after 60 begin dealing with blood sugar issues, joint pain, thinning skin, cardiovascular concerns, and memory problems all at once. The conventional approach usually treats each problem separately. One medication for glucose, another for blood pressure, another for pain, another for cholesterol. But modern nutritional science is beginning to show something very different. In many cases, the underlying driver connecting all these conditions is chronic inflammation itself. And this is where extra virgin olive oil becomes incredibly interesting, because many of its natural compounds target inflammation across several pathways simultaneously, not one system, multiple systems at once. Today, we are counting down the 5 most important transformations researchers have documented when adults over 60 consume 2 tablespoons of high-quality extra virgin olive oil daily for about 60 days. Some of these changes are measurable in blood tests. Others are felt physically in ways people notice surprisingly quickly. And by the end, I will explain the brain-related discovery that completely changed how many scientists view olive oil. But first, we begin with transformation number 5, blood sugar regulation. Most people assume adding fat to meals would make blood sugar control worse. But with extra virgin olive oil, the opposite often happens. The reason comes down to one major component called oleic acid, which makes up nearly 73% of olive oil's composition. When you consume extra virgin olive oil alongside food, oleic acid helps stimulate the release of a hormone called GLP-1, short for glucagon-like peptide 1. This hormone plays a powerful role in blood sugar regulation. It improves insulin response, helping your body move glucose out of the bloodstream more efficiently. But it also slows gastric emptying, meaning food leaves the stomach more gradually. Think of your bloodstream like a busy highway. Without enough GLP-1 activity, glucose rushes into the blood all at once, creating traffic jams in the form of blood sugar spikes. But when GLP-1 is activated properly, the flow becomes steady and controlled instead of chaotic. This matters enormously after 60 because repeated glucose spikes damage blood vessels, nerves, and even the insulin-producing cells of the pancreas itself. Over time, those spikes contribute to prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. One study published in the journal Diabetes Care followed adults with type 2 diabetes for 8 weeks. Participants who replaced their usual fats with extra virgin olive oil experienced about a 22% reduction in post-meal glucose spikes. That is a significant improvement from a simple dietary change. I remember a patient I will call Walter, a 66-year-old retired postal worker from Philadelphia. For years, his fasting glucose hovered in the pre-diabetic range. Every doctor visit felt like he was getting closer to medication. Instead of making drastic changes all at once, we introduced 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil daily, one over vegetables at lunch and another over dinner. Nothing else changed initially, no extreme diet. No complicated supplement routine. 60 days later, his fasting glucose had dropped noticeably, and his post-meal spikes became far more stable. His physician, unaware of the dietary adjustment, told him his numbers had improved enough to avoid medication for the time being. Walter later told me something I never forgot. He said, "I thought I was one bad test result away from another prescription. I didn't realize something in my kitchen could help this much. And what makes this especially powerful is how simple it is to apply. 2 tablespoons daily with meals, not alone. Drizzle it over vegetables, salads, or whole grain bread. Avoid overheating it because excessive heat damages many of the beneficial polyphenols responsible for these effects. But blood sugar is only the beginning, because the next transformation is the one many people actually feel first. And it involves something millions of adults over 60 struggle with every single morning when they get out of bed: their joints. Joint pain has a way of changing a person's entire day before the morning even begins. For many adults over 60, the hardest part is not walking long distances or climbing stairs. It is the small moments most people take for granted: getting out of bed without stiffness, closing your hand around a coffee mug, turning a doorknob, standing up after sitting for too long. Over time, those little frustrations slowly become part of daily life, and many people start believing pain is simply the price of getting older. But what if part of that pain is not aging itself, but ongoing inflammation that never fully shuts off? This is where olive oil becomes far more powerful than most people realize. Extra virgin olive oil contains a natural compound called oleocanthal. If you have ever tasted high-quality olive oil and noticed a peppery sensation or slight burning feeling at the back of your throat, that sensation comes from oleocanthal. And surprisingly, that burn is not a bad sign. It is actually one of the strongest indicators that the oil contains the anti-inflammatory compounds researchers are looking for. Years ago, scientists at the Monell Chemical Senses Center and the University of Pennsylvania made a remarkable discovery. They found that oleocanthal blocks inflammatory enzymes called COX-1 and COX-2 using the exact same biological pathway as ibuprofen. Not a similar pathway, the same one. That finding completely changed how many researchers viewed olive oil, because suddenly, a natural food compound was demonstrating a mechanism identical to one of the world's most commonly used anti inflammatory medications. Now, olive oil is not as concentrated as ibuprofen, of course. Researchers estimated that several tablespoons of high quality olive oil may provide an anti inflammatory effect roughly equal to a fraction of a standard adult ibuprofen dose. But here is the difference that matters: ibuprofen enters the bloodstream quickly, peaks fast, and then disappears. Olive oil, consumed daily, creates a lower but continuous anti inflammatory effect that slowly accumulates in tissues over time. Think of it this way: taking pain medication is like using a fire extinguisher after flames appear. Daily olive oil works more like a built in sprinkler system, quietly reducing the chance of the fire growing in the first place. That matters enormously in an aging body where chronic inflammation is often running quietly every single day. One clinical trial followed adults between 55 and 80 with knee osteoarthritis over 8 weeks. Participants consuming 2 tablespoons of high phenolic extra virgin olive oil daily experienced measurable improvements in mobility and pain levels. Joint discomfort dropped significantly, morning stiffness improved, and inflammatory blood markers decreased as well. For many people, these changes are not subtle. I remember a woman I will call Catherine, a retired violinist in her early 70s. For years, arthritis in her hands and knee had forced her into a routine of daily pain medication. It helped temporarily, but over time, she began developing stomach irritation from prolonged ibuprofen use. She felt trapped between pain on one side and medication side effects on the other. When we discussed the research behind oleocanthal, she was skeptical at first. Most people are. It sounds almost too simple. But she decided to try adding 2 tablespoons of high-quality extra virgin olive oil into her meals every day while slowly reducing her medication under medical supervision. About 2 months later, she described something emotional to me. She said her morning stiffness had dropped so much that she picked up her violin again for the first time in years. Not because the pain had magically vanished overnight, but because the inflammation had slowly become more manageable. And that is the important point. Olive oil is not magic. It is biology. It works gradually by influencing the inflammatory systems driving many age-related problems underneath the surface. The practical side matters too. Quality is everything here. The beneficial compounds responsible for these effects are found mainly in high-quality extra virgin olive oil rich in polyphenols. Oils that taste flat, bland, or overly processed often contain far fewer active compounds. Look for oils stored in dark glass bottles because light damages polyphenols over time. Fresh harvest dates matter too. And if you taste the oil raw and feel that peppery sensation in the throat, that is usually a good sign the oleocanthal content is still present. There is also another detail many people overlook. Heat destroys some of these compounds. That means at least part of your daily intake should be consumed raw whenever possible. Drizzle it over vegetables after cooking. Add it to salads. Use it over whole grain bread or soups once they have cooled slightly. And if you really want to enhance absorption, pair olive oil with foods rich in vitamin C. Bell peppers, citrus, strawberries, or lemon juice can help increase the body's ability to absorb certain polyphenols more effectively. But joint health is only part of the story. The third transformation surprises many people because almost nobody associates olive oil with skin aging. Yet modern dermatology research is beginning to show that the connection is real and biologically measurable. Most people assume aging skin simply comes from getting older and producing less collagen. While that is partly true, it is not the whole picture. After 60, one of the biggest problems is not just slower collagen production. It is accelerated collagen destruction. Inside aging skin are enzymes called matrix metalloproteinases, often shortened to MMPs. These enzymes break down collagen and elastin fibers that give skin its strength, structure, and elasticity. As inflammation increases with age, MMP activity increases too. In simple terms, the body begins destroying collagen faster than it can rebuild it. That is why aging skin becomes thinner, drier, and more fragile over time. It is not only a slowdown in repair, it is an acceleration of breakdown. Researchers studying olive oil discovered that certain polyphenols, particularly hydroxytyrosol and tyrosol, help suppress the activity of these collagen-damaging enzymes. Instead of merely moisturizing the surface of the skin, these compounds influence the biological processes happening inside skin cells themselves. And there is another fascinating mechanism involved. The primary fat in olive oil, oleic acid, closely resembles some of the natural fats found in healthy human skin. After age 60, the skin's oil production decreases significantly. This contributes to dryness, increased sensitivity, and weaker skin barriers. When oleic acid is consumed regularly, portions of it become incorporated into skin cell membranes. In a sense, the body begins rebuilding part of its skin barrier from the inside out. One clinical study involving older women found measurable improvements in skin elasticity, hydration retention, and overall barrier function after regular consumption of high polyphenol olive oil over several weeks. What's most was that the greatest improvements were often seen in older participants whose skin had already become more depleted. In other words, the body still retains an impressive ability to respond when given the right nutritional support, even later in life. I remember speaking with a woman named Marilyn, a retired florist in her mid-70s. She originally came in concerned about cardiovascular health, not appearance. After several weeks of daily olive oil use, she noticed something unexpected. The skin on the backs of her hands, which had become paper-thin and easily irritated, felt stronger and less fragile. She had not changed creams or skincare products. The only consistent change was the olive oil. Again, this does not mean olive oil reverses aging. But it does suggest the body continues responding to nutritional signals long after many people assume decline is inevitable. And that idea matters deeply because so many adults begin believing their best years of physical resilience are behind them. Yet biology is far more adaptable than people think. Now, if you are finding this information useful, this is exactly why conversations like this matter. Most adults are never told how strongly chronic inflammation connects blood sugar, joints, skin, arteries, and even brain health together. Instead, these problems are treated like isolated issues with isolated solutions. But the deeper science tells a different story, and the next transformation may be the clearest example of that yet, because it involves the cells lining your arteries, the health of your blood vessels, and one of the most important systems determining how well your heart and circulation function after 60. Most people think about heart health in terms of cholesterol numbers. They focus on total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, triglycerides, and whether those values fall inside or outside the range printed on a lab report. But modern cardiovascular research has revealed something much more important than cholesterol alone. The true condition of your arteries often depends on the health of the thin layer of cells lining every blood vessel in your body. These cells are called endothelial cells, and they quietly control some of the most important functions in human biology. They regulate blood flow, help arteries stay flexible, manage inflammation inside vessel walls, and influence whether plaque begins forming inside the circulatory system. When endothelial function declines after 60, arteries become stiffer and less responsive. Blood pressure often rises, circulation becomes less efficient, plaque buildup accelerates, and the risk of heart attacks and strokes increases dramatically. This is one reason chronic inflammation is so dangerous. It does not just affect one organ. It slowly damages the entire vascular system from the inside out. Now here is where extra virgin olive oil becomes remarkable once again. The polyphenols found in high-quality olive oil, especially hydroxytyrosol, enter the bloodstream after digestion and come into direct contact with endothelial cells. Research has shown these compounds stimulate the production of nitric oxide, one of the most important signaling molecules for vascular health. Nitric oxide tells blood vessels to relax. When arteries relax properly, blood flows more smoothly, circulation improves, and pressure on vessel walls decreases. In healthy younger bodies, nitric oxide production happens naturally and efficiently. But with age, inflammation, and oxidative stress interfere with this process. That is why blood vessels often become less flexible over time. But olive oil appears to help restore part of this system. One clinical trial involving adults with endothelial dysfunction found that daily extra virgin olive oil consumption improved flow-mediated dilation by nearly 30% in just 8 weeks. Flow-mediated dilation is considered one of the gold standard measurements of endothelial health, because it directly reflects how well blood vessels respond and expand. In simple language, the arteries became more functional again. But that is only one half of the cardiovascular story. The second half involves oxidized LDL cholesterol, and this distinction is incredibly important because it changes how we think about heart disease itself. Most people have been taught that LDL cholesterol is automatically bad, but LDL actually serves useful functions in the body. Problems begin when LDL particles become oxidized by free radicals and chronic inflammation. Once oxidized, LDL becomes highly inflammatory. Immune cells attack it inside artery walls, triggering plaque formation and vascular damage. Researchers discovered that olive oil polyphenols act like protective shields around LDL particles, reducing their susceptibility to oxidation. In other words, the cholesterol may still exist, but it becomes less dangerous because it is less damaged. One European study found high polyphenol olive oil reduced LDL oxidation by roughly 36% within only 4 weeks. That is a major shift from a simple dietary intervention. I remember a patient named Frank, a retired contractor approaching 70. Frank had already been taking cholesterol medication for years. His LDL numbers looked acceptable on paper, but his cardiologist remained concerned because his endothelial function still showed signs of vascular stress. When we discussed olive oil, Frank laughed and asked, "You're telling me the oil I dip bread into could help my arteries?" What I explained to him was important. Olive oil does not necessarily replace medication. It works differently. Medication may reduce the amount of LDL your body produces. Olive oil helps protect the blood vessels themselves while also reducing oxidation and inflammation. The two approaches can complement each other. Frank added 2 tablespoons of high-quality extra virgin olive oil daily while continuing his physician-supervised treatment plan. About 2 months later, his vascular measurements improved enough that even his cardiologist noticed the difference. What fascinated Frank most was not the science itself. It was the realization that nutrition was influencing processes he previously assumed only medication could affect. And that realization matters because so many people underestimate how powerfully food interacts with human biology over time. But quality truly matters here. Many supermarket oils labeled olive oil contain fewer active polyphenols because of processing, age, exposure to heat, or poor storage. The oils with the strongest research support are high polyphenol extra virgin olive oils, stored in dark bottles and harvested relatively recently. Taste matters too. A mild, buttery flavor may seem appealing, but that sharp, peppery sensation in the throat often indicates higher oleocanthal and polyphenol levels. The stronger the burn, the more biologically active compounds are usually present. And there is another strategy researchers often recommend for maximizing cardiovascular benefits. Pair olive oil with nitrate-rich leafy greens like spinach, kale, or Swiss chard. These vegetables support nitric oxide production through a completely different pathway. Together, they create a synergistic effect that helps blood vessels function more efficiently. What makes this fascinating is how interconnected the body truly is. The same inflammation-damaging blood vessels is often damaging joints, skin, insulin signaling, and even brain tissue at the same time. One fire spreading through multiple rooms. And now we arrive at the transformation that surprised even many scientists studying olive oil. Because almost nobody originally associated olive oil with brain protection. Yet the emerging neuroscience research is impossible to ignore. Your brain is approximately 60% fat by dry weight, making it one of the fattiest organs in the body. And the dominant fat within the brain is oleic acid, the same monounsaturated fat that makes up most of extra virgin olive oil. But the real brain benefits are not simply about fat composition. They involve something much more precise. A powerful olive oil polyphenol called hydroxytyrosol has the rare ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. This matters enormously because the blood-brain barrier is one of the most selective filters in the human body. It protects brain tissue by preventing many substances circulating in the bloodstream from entering the brain itself. Most compounds never make it through. Hydroxytyrosol does. Once inside the brain, researchers discovered it activates a protective cellular system known as the NRF2 pathway. The NRF2 pathway functions almost like a master switch for the brain's antioxidant defense system. When activated, it stimulates the production of powerful protective enzymes including superoxide dismutase, catalase, and glutathione peroxidase. These enzymes help neutralize oxidative stress before it damages neurons. Why does this matter after 60? Because aging brains experience increasing oxidative stress and inflammation over time. Those processes contribute to memory decline, slower cognition, and neurodegenerative diseases. The most astonishing discovery, however, involved another olive oil compound, oleocanthal. Researchers studying neurodegenerative disease found that oleocanthal appears to enhance the brain's ability to clear amyloid beta proteins. These proteins are strongly associated with the plaque buildup seen in Alzheimer's disease. Now, to be clear, olive oil is not a cure for Alzheimer's disease. No serious scientist would claim that. But the fact that a natural dietary compound may help support the brain's own waste clearance systems is one of the most exciting areas in nutritional neuroscience today. One study found oleocanthal increased the activity of transport proteins involved in removing amyloid beta from the brain by roughly 40%. That finding stunned many researchers because amyloid clearance is considered one of the major targets in modern Alzheimer's research. Imagine discovering that a food people have consumed for thousands of years may influence one of the brain's most important protective systems. That is why scientists became so interested in Mediterranean dietary patterns in the first place. I remember speaking with a woman named Dorothy, a retired accountant in her mid 70s. Her greatest fear was not heart disease or arthritis, it was memory loss. Her mother had suffered from Alzheimer's disease, and Dorothy had begun noticing increasing difficulty recalling words and staying mentally sharp. She was terrified history was repeating itself. When we discussed the research behind olive oil and brain inflammation, she asked the same question many people ask: can something this simple really matter? The honest answer is this: it is not a miracle, it is not a guarantee, but the evidence strongly suggests olive oil supports several of the brain's natural protective systems simultaneously. Dorothy began incorporating 2 tablespoons of high-quality olive oil daily into her meals alongside other anti-inflammatory dietary changes. A few months later, she described feeling mentally clearer, especially in the mornings. Her word-finding struggles had become less frequent, and she found herself finishing crossword puzzles again without the same frustration she had been experiencing before. Those changes may sound small to some people, but to someone frightened about cognitive decline, they can feel enormously meaningful. And the science behind those experiences continues growing stronger every year. But there is still one final piece to understand, because the real power of olive oil is not just about one benefit at a time. It is about the bigger picture scientists are finally beginning to see about aging itself, chronic inflammation, and why so many different health problems may actually share the same root cause.